Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It was a Tuesday night, cold and quiet, the kind that makes a house feel too big. She stood by the kitchen counter, holding her phone like a weapon. I was sitting at the table, halfway through a takeout box from Chick-fil-A, when she finally said it. She told me, no kissing, no hugging, no touch. Just like that. Calm, almost bored, as if she were reciting a rule instead of ending something. I remember the way her voice didn't shake. That's what stung the most. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was detachment, like she'd already moved on. For a moment, I thought she was joking. We'd had our rough weeks, sure, but this? It was different. There was no argument, no reason, just walls built out of silence. I looked at her, waiting for the rest of the sentence. It never came. So I said, no rent, no gas, no groceries. The air froze between us. She blinked, once, as if trying to process what I'd just said. Then she turned away, muttering something about me being childish. I didn't respond. I just leaned back, watching her walk away like she owned the place. That was the moment I realized. I'd spent too long paying for peace that never came. We'd been together for almost 4 years. I covered the bills, the groceries, the gas, the endless Target runs she loved so much. She always said she needed space to focus on herself, but that space had become a wall I couldn't get through. She'd scroll through Amazon late at night, adding things to the cart while I sat next to her, invisible. Every add to cart felt like another inch of distance. And now, here we were, two strangers in the same house, dividing air instead of affection. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I finished my food, put the container in the trash, and went to the bedroom. She stayed in the living room, scrolling, pretending not to care. But I saw it, the way her hands shook slightly when she typed. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to beg. I was just going to stop showing up for a woman who no longer wanted me there. She said no touch? Fine. Then I'd show her what distance really felt like. And by the time she realized what that meant, it would already be too late. The next morning, the house felt heavier than usual. She moved around quietly, careful not to look at me, like silence could erase what we'd said the night before. I poured myself coffee, sat at the table, and watched her open the fridge. Empty shelves, nothing but a few eggs and a half-empty bottle of oat milk she always bought from Target. She sighed, closed the door, and turned toward me, waiting for me to offer to go shopping. I didn't. She stood there for a moment, eyes searching mine, but I stayed silent. Eventually, she muttered something about needing to get things done and walked out, slamming the door just hard enough to make a point. That was the first day I didn't cover for her. I didn't fill up her car at the gas station. I didn't transfer money for groceries. I didn't even text to check if she got home safe. I'd done all that for years out of habit, out of love, or maybe out of fear of losing her. But now, I just let her figure it out on her own. When she came back that night, she looked surprised to find the fridge still empty and the thermostat set low. She asked if I forgot to pay the gas bill. I said no, I just stopped paying for things that don't pay back. She didn't respond, but her jaw tightened, that small flicker of control slipping away from her eyes. She tried to pretend she didn't care. She ordered takeout from Applebee's, opened her laptop, and watched Netflix like everything was fine. But halfway through her meal, the Wi-Fi cut off. I'd canceled that too. She stared at the blank screen, then at me. I didn't say a word. Later, when I went to bed, I heard her pacing the living room. A few quiet tears, a few angry whispers into her phone, probably talking to one of her friends, the same ones who told her to set boundaries and put herself first. Funny how no one teaches them what happens when those boundaries turn into walls. By the third day, the house was a mess of silence and cold air. She barely spoke, and when she did, her voice was softer. The arrogance was gone, replaced by uncertainty. She asked if I wanted dinner. I said I'd already eaten. She didn't ask where. The truth was, I hadn't. I just wanted to see how long it would take her to miss what she thought she didn't need. And that's when I noticed something new in her eyes, fear. Not of losing me, but of realizing she already had. By the end of that week, the shift was complete. She stopped waking up early, stopped fixing her hair, stopped pretending everything was fine. I'd come home from work and find her sitting on the couch in silence, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling aimlessly on her iPhone like she was searching for something that no longer existed. The same woman who once told me she needed space now couldn't stand being left alone in it. I didn't rub it in. I didn't even mention it. I just kept moving through the house like a ghost, quiet, calm, deliberate. I started keeping my things in order, cooking for one, folding my laundry separately. She noticed every little change, but she never said anything. Her silence had finally turned against her. On Saturday morning, she asked if I could take her car to get gas. I told her I couldn't. You have a car. You can do it. She hesitated, realizing I wasn't joking. She left without another word. When she came back, she had that look of quiet frustration, the one people wear when they realize independence isn't as easy as it sounds. That evening, she tried something new. She made dinner. Pasta, salad, a bottle of cheap wine. I knew what she was doing. It was an attempt to hit reset, to act like things were normal again. She set the table, lit a small candle from Bath and Body Works, and waited for me to sit down. I didn't. I told her I'd already eaten. She just stood there, frozen, eyes flicking between the food and my face. The silence that followed was brutal. She whispered, "I was just trying." I looked at her and said, "So was I." Then I walked out. I went for a drive, no destination, just the hum of my Ford F-150 and the glow of streetlights passing by. For the first time in months, I felt calm. It wasn't happiness exactly, it was control. The kind that comes when you stop begging for balance and start creating it yourself. When I got home, she was still awake. The dinner was untouched, the wine still unopened. She didn't speak. Neither did I. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Lying there in the dark, I realized something. She didn't lose me because she said no touch. She lost me because she forgot what it meant to be close long before that. And now, she was starting to feel what real distance truly meant. By the second week, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It was a waiting room, cold, quiet, temporary. She walked through it like a stranger, careful not to touch anything, careful not to touch me. But something had shifted. She wasn't distant out of pride anymore. She was distant because she didn't know how to come back. Every night, she'd sit on the couch scrolling through Amazon, pretending to be busy. The glow from her phone lit up her face, but her eyes looked empty. I'd pass by on my way to the kitchen, grab a drink, and say nothing. The silence between us was heavy enough to crush every unspoken apology she didn't know how to make. One evening, she broke it. She asked if I wanted to watch a movie. The same woman who once banned any kind of affection now wanted company. I told her I was heading out. She didn't ask where. I saw the flicker of panic when I grabbed my keys. That's when she realized I wasn't bluffing anymore. My life was already expanding beyond her reach. I drove aimlessly, ended up at a small diner just outside town. I sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and watched the rain through the window. Across from me, a couple laughed quietly, sharing fries, completely unaware of the storm I'd left behind. I remember thinking how strange it was that something as simple as touch, something I once took for granted, had become a weapon in our house. When I got home, she was asleep on the couch, still in her work clothes, TV on but muted. A half-eaten sandwich from Subway sat on the table. For the first time, she looked human again. Not distant, not defensive, just tired. I stood there for a moment, wondering if this was guilt or exhaustion. Maybe both. Over the next few days, she started to soften in small ways. Leaving the door open when I walked by, asking simple questions, checking if I'd eaten. But the damage was already done. Every gesture felt rehearsed, every word like a performance. On Friday night, she came into the bedroom for the first time in weeks. She stood in the doorway, quiet, hands trembling slightly. She said, "I don't know how we got here." I looked at her and replied, by pretending nothing was wrong. She didn't argue, just turned and walked away. And as she closed the door behind her, I realized the truth. Sometimes, distance doesn't happen when people drift apart. It happens when one of them finally stops pretending. By the third week, she started showing cracks. Not the loud kind, not screaming or throwing things, just quiet unraveling. I'd find her staring at her phone for long minutes, scrolling through old photos of us on Facebook, then quickly locking the screen when I walked in. She had that look people get when they start realizing they broke something they can't replace. I didn't react. I moved through my routines like clockwork: work, gym, home. I made sure to be polite, calm, unshakable. No shouting, no pleading. Just the kind of silence that teaches a lesson. One evening, she came home from Target with grocery bags. It used to be something I did every week while she sat at home scrolling through her iPhone. Now, she was the one carrying everything alone. She dropped the bags on the counter, out of breath, and said, "You could have helped." I looked at her and said, "You told me no touch. I'm respecting that." Her eyes filled for a second, but she turned away before I could see. She unpacked everything in silence, putting things in their places, trying to act normal. But even her breathing gave her away. It was shaky, shallow, the sound of someone trying not to fall apart. Later that night, I found her sitting in the living room, still dressed for work, holding one of my hoodies. She didn't notice me at first. She was just sitting there, holding it against her chest, like she was trying to remember something that used to feel safe. When she realized I was standing in the doorway, she whispered, "I miss how it used to be." I didn't answer. I just nodded slightly and went upstairs. I heard her crying quietly after I closed the door. Not the dramatic kind of crying she used to do during fights. This one was different. Softer. Real. The next morning, she made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. She didn't say a word, just set a plate in front of me and sat across the table. She looked exhausted. There was no makeup, no mask, just honesty written across her face. For a moment, I almost said something. Almost. But then I remembered. This was the same woman who once said she didn't want my touch. Now she was realizing what life without it really meant. I finished my coffee, stood up, and said, "I've got work." And as I walked out the door, I could feel her staring at the space I'd left behind, finally realizing that silence isn't empty. It's full of everything she took for granted. By the fourth week, I had learned to live without her. The strange part was how easy it became once I stopped trying. I filled my time with long drives, early gym sessions, and quiet dinners alone. I'd pick up a black coffee from Starbucks on the way to work and sit in my Ford F-150 for a few minutes before going inside, enjoying the quiet that used to make me restless. Now it felt like freedom. She, on the other hand, was sinking. I could see it in her movements, the way she lingered around me without saying anything. She'd wait by the doorway when I came home, hoping I'd start a conversation, but I'd just nod and walk past her. It wasn't cruelty. It was discipline. The kind of silence that teaches someone the cost of their choices. One night, I came home late. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a half-empty glass of wine, staring at the flickering candle in front of her. The groceries from Walmart were still in the bags. I walked past her, and she whispered, "Do you even care anymore?" I didn't answer, because that question wasn't for me. It was for herself. A few days later, she tried another tactic. She started dressing up again, wearing perfume, cooking dinner. I could tell she was trying to pull me back in with the same habits that used to work. But I didn't react, because I wasn't the same man anymore. I wasn't hungry for attention. I was full of clarity. One evening, as I was watching the news, she sat down across from me. She didn't say a word for a long time. Then, softly, she said, "I miss us." Her voice cracked just slightly, and for the first time in weeks, I looked directly at her. There was no anger left in her eyes, only regret. I said, "You miss what I gave, not who I am." She didn't argue. She just looked down at her hands, realizing the difference. The next morning, she didn't come downstairs. I found her later, sitting in the backyard with her coffee, staring at nothing. The same woman who once demanded control now looked lost in her own emptiness. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't lost me to another woman. She'd lost me to peace, to the version of myself that no longer needed her approval to feel whole. I didn't say goodbye. I just went inside, packed a bag, and left for the weekend without a word. I didn't need to announce my absence anymore. My silence said everything. I didn't tell her where I went that weekend. I just left early Friday morning, no note, no explanation. I drove for hours with no real destination, just the road, the hum of the tires, and the kind of silence that used to scare me, but now felt like oxygen. I stopped at a Waffle House outside of town, sat by the window, and watched families laughing over breakfast. No tension, no pretending, just people being real. I realized I hadn't felt that kind of simplicity in years. Back home, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no messages. By Sunday, There were 10 missed calls, then 20. Then one text. Are you okay? I didn't respond. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just letting her feel what it's like when the effort isn't one-sided. When I finally drove back, the house was spotless, too clean, too quiet. The kind of clean that comes from guilt, not care. She was sitting at the dining table, dressed like she'd been waiting all weekend. Her eyes widened when she saw me walk in. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I put my keys on the counter and said, "You don't have to wait for me anymore." Her face fell, and she whispered, "I didn't know it would get like this." I looked at her and said, "It always gets like this when someone thinks affection is optional." She didn't answer. She just sat there, staring down at her hands, the silence between us louder than any argument we'd ever had. That night, she tried one last time. She came to bed quietly, lying down beside me without touching. I could hear her breathing, slow and careful. Minutes passed. Then she whispered, "Do you hate me?" I said, "No. I just finally love myself more." She didn't move, didn't cry, just turned away, curling into herself like someone who finally understood what it meant to be alone. The next morning, I woke up early. She was still asleep, hair tangled, face pale. I watched her for a moment and realized something. She wasn't the villain anymore. She was just a woman who built her walls too high and got trapped behind them. I grabbed my jacket, walked out the door, and didn't look back. Not out of anger, but because I'd already made peace with leaving long before I physically did. And for the first time, I wasn't walking away from her. I was walking toward myself. After I left that morning, I drove with no real plan. Just open roads, coffee in a paper cup, and silence that no longer felt like punishment. I stopped at a small gas station off the highway and leaned against my Ford F-150, watching the sun come up over an empty stretch of road. For the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, peace. The kind that comes after you finally stop fighting for something that keeps breaking you. A few hours later, I checked my phone. Missed calls again. A few messages. One said, "Please come home. I just want to talk." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to a quiet lake on the edge of town, sat on a bench, and watched the water move. I thought about how many times I tried to explain myself to her. How many times I tried to earn back respect that shouldn't have been taken in the first place. It felt strange realizing I didn't have to anymore. By evening, I finally drove back. The lights in the house were off, the driveway empty. For a second, I thought she might have left. But when I opened the door, she was there, sitting on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, surrounded by a few half-packed boxes. The sight of her like that didn't make me angry. It just confirmed what I already knew. She was finally facing herself. She looked up when she saw me. Her voice was small, quiet. "I didn't think you'd actually go." I said, "You told me not to touch you. I just listened." She shook her head, eyes wet but steady. "I didn't mean it like that." I replied, "That's the problem. You never realized what your words meant until they came back to you." She didn't argue. She just sat there, hands trembling, trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. The silence between us stretched, and for once, it wasn't awkward. It was real. The kind of silence that settles when there's nothing left to prove. I walked past her, grabbed my bag, and started packing the rest of my things. She didn't stop me. She didn't beg. Just watched. When I finished, I turned to her and said, "I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing it out of respect, for myself." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening in the dim light. "I get it," she whispered. But the truth was, she didn't. Not yet. She was only beginning to understand what it means when love walks out, without slamming the door. The morning after I packed my things, the house was unnervingly still. I remember sitting in my truck, engine running, looking at the front door. I wasn't waiting for her to come out. I was waiting for myself to let go. The air was cold, and everything felt suspended, like time was holding its breath. I thought about all the years I'd carried her silence like it was my fault. Now, the weight was gone. I drove to a small diner just off the highway, ordered black coffee and eggs, and sat alone at the counter. The waitress asked if I wanted another cup, and I said yes, just to stay a little longer. Across from me, a young couple was laughing, holding hands, careless in a way that felt foreign to me now. I didn't envy them. I just wondered when love had started feeling like survival instead of warmth. When I checked my phone, there were no new messages. That was new. For the first time, She hadn't reached out. I knew what that meant. She had finally understood that I wasn't bluffing, that the quiet I carried wasn't temporary. Later that afternoon, I got a call from her sister, Emily. She said, "She's not taking this well. She hasn't been sleeping." I didn't say much, just listened. Then Emily added, "She said she misses who you were." I paused before replying. That man only existed when he was loved right. Emily went silent. There was nothing else to say. That night, I stopped by the lake again. The same place I'd sat a few days earlier. The wind was sharp, and the reflection of the moon rippled across the water. I thought about the last few years, the small dismissals, the way affection became a negotiation, the way I'd let her set the rules and call it balance. She'd said, "No touch," but what she really meant was no effort. And now, she was alone with the rules she'd made. I didn't hate her. I didn't wish her pain. I just knew this had to happen. Because some people don't wake up until the silence is too loud to ignore. Before I left, I sent her one last message. Just 4 words: take care of yourself. I didn't expect a reply, and she didn't send one. I turned off my phone, started the truck, and drove until the city lights disappeared behind me. The farther I went, the lighter it felt. For the first time in years, I wasn't driving away from something. I was driving toward peace. A few weeks passed before I heard anything about her again. By then, life had settled into a strange kind of quiet rhythm. Work, gym, late-night drives with no destination. I rented a small apartment just outside the city, nothing fancy, but peaceful. The kind of place where silence didn't feel heavy anymore. The walls were bare, the fridge half empty, but for the first time, everything in that space belonged to me. My rules, my pace, my peace. One evening, as I was drinking coffee from the same mug I used every morning, I got a text. Unknown number. But I knew who it was before I opened it. It said, "I understand now." Just 3 words. No begging, no apology, no promise to change. I read it twice, then set the phone down. I didn't reply. Some truths don't need acknowledgement. They just exist. A few days later, I heard from Emily again. She told me my ex had moved out of state, closer to her parents. She said she'd started therapy, trying to figure herself out. I told her I wished her well. And I meant it. Because forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me not carrying her mistakes anymore. That night, I took a drive through town, past the places that used to mean something. Our old Target runs on Sundays, the Chick-fil-A where she'd always steal fries from my plate, the Starbucks where she'd sit scrolling through her phone, lost in her own world. Each place used to hurt. Now they were just places. The past had lost its power. I ended up by the lake again, the same spot where I'd first decided to leave. The air was colder now, sharper. I stood there for a while, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the water. I thought about how quiet endings can be. No shouting, no chaos, just stillness. The kind of ending where you finally stop trying to rewrite what's already been written. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. That sentence had become my truth, my compass. The version of me that used to beg for love was gone. In his place stood a man who understood value, not in others' approval, but in his own peace. As I walked back to my truck, I looked up at the sky, clear, wide, endless. For the first time, I didn't think about what I'd lost. I thought about what I'd found. Myself. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.